1917 is a World War I film about two soldiers tasked with delivering an urgent message to the 2nd Battalion of the Devonshire Regiment, who are about to run headlong into a German trap. On the line are the lives of 1,600 British soldiers, including the brother of Blake, one of the two soldiers tasked with the mission. 1917 is directed by Sam Mendes, who you know best as the director of American Beauty, Skyfall, Spectre, and Road to Perdition. The film stars George MacKay as Schofield and Dean Charles Chapman as Blake. The film also features appearances by Mark Strong, Andrew Scott, Richard Madden, Claire Duburcq, Colin Firth, and Benedict Cumberbatch. Also of note, Academy Award-winning cinematographer Roger Deakins was the cinematographer on 1917. I'm willing to bet $100, $1,000, maybe even just more money than I have, that he is going to win the Academy Award again for this film. It is real nice looking. And that's a good way to segue into the actual review, talking about the cinematography. Especially the fact that this film uses cinematography as spectacle. If you're not aware, 1917 is shot to look like one continuous long take, except there are obvious cuts in it that are used to break up action, and I think they also wanted to have reset points for really complicated action sequences. I don't hold this against the film, I understand why they did it. It would have been super hard to go from the very first frame of the film to the end of the film in one long take. They also would have had to change certain set pieces entirely, but there are issues that arise when shooting a film like this. And to better illustrate this point, I think a good basis of comparison is Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men. I don't think that comparing 1917 to a true one-take film like Victoria is really necessary because, as I said, 1917 is not a true one-take film. And I think Children of Men provides us with a better blueprint as to how we could have improved 1917 if you and I were the filmmakers and we had all the talent of Sam Mendes and Roger Deakins. When you look at the long takes in Children of Men, there's a certain kind of anxiety that comes along with them. We're not really used to them, they're used sparsely throughout the film, but when they do happen, I feel a sense of anxiety because I'm wondering, when is it all going to go wrong? When is the action going to cut? How is this going to affect later parts in the film? And with 1917, we really don't get that because from very early on, we understand that this is meant to be one continuous shot, even if there are hidden edits and not so hidden edits. And so as we progress through the film, that anxiety that we get from the long take is basically taken away because we understand, based on the premise of the film, two soldiers having to deliver a message to a battalion so they don't get killed by the Germans, we understand that that has to be completed. And so when one or two of these soldiers is going through a particular action sequence, we understand that they are probably going to survive, or at the very least, the message that they are trying to deliver will be delivered, as that is the total arc of the narrative in this film. We must go from point A to point B, and so this long take that's happening right there in the middle seems less important because we know where we're going eventually, even if we're not quite sure what the twists and turns are going to be. To that point, I think 1917 would have been a more effective film if it had used long takes like Children of Men did. It could have utilized them in very particular sequences. There's one that pops to mind near the end of the film, which is just the shot that Roger Deakins wins the Academy Award with. Really, it's the whole film, but there's one long take that begins near the end of the film that's completely in darkness. There's flares going off in the sky. There's a building burning in the background, and it is a phenomenal shot. It's one of the best of the year. Single shots, like just incredible. And then a long take proceeds from that. And so it's really interesting to see the character move through all of that scenery, and that really worked for me. And since I knew this one character had to make it to the end of the film, when he does stumble upon a German soldier amongst all this darkness and flares and fires and whatnot, it's not as tense. It's almost like when you're watching a film like Rogue One, when you know that most of these characters have to die by the end of it. How do you build tension around their deaths when you know it's going to happen anyways? That said, I don't want to make it seem like the cinematography in this film was bad. I just think that the decision to use only long takes and trying to string them together as one continuous shot was perhaps overutilized and diminished certain points of the film or certain parts of the film where they could have done a better job of building tension had they not relied on the one take so much. Also, I want to point out that other technical aspects of the film are very, very good. We're talking about production design, set design, costumes, hair and makeup, props. All of that stuff was top-notch. It really did feel like we were traversing a World War I battleground. going from the trenches to no man's land, to a French forest, to beyond enemy lines and back again, and it was just wonderful. It did look really, really good, and everything really came together to make it seem like a cohesive space that these two soldiers were traveling through. So props to every single person who worked on the film in these more technical departments. You did an amazing job. All that said, I do have an issue with the script. And this is where we're gonna get into spoiler territory. So if you want to know my final thoughts on the film without having some of the film's big plot moments be spoiled for you, then go to this time code. This one. Not this one, this one. So as I kind of alluded to before, we start with two soldiers, Schofield and Blake, and then I mentioned in the one sequence later in the film, we're following one soldier through that sequence. And that is because Blake gets fucking stabbed in the chest by a German and he just dies. And this happens like maybe a half hour, 35 minutes into the film. And this to me was a mistake. It's a mistake that I feel okay bringing up because there was another clear way that the filmmakers could have gone, and that would have been Schofield dying. This is a mistake in my mind because when we start the film, all of the emotional weight of the film is on Blake. He has the most to lose because his brother is in the battalion that is going to go into the German trap, whereas Schofield is presented as a character who is kind of done with war but also can't go back home, so he's kind of just stuck. He can't leave, he doesn't want to leave, but he also hates the fact that he has to be in the war at all. Whereas Blake is like, no, I have to save my brother, and there's 1,600 British dudes that I also have to help. He is really carrying the film throughout the first half an hour when he is alive. But then, he's not alive. He is killed quite suddenly by a German pilot that they are trying to help, and then all of the emotional weight of the film shifts to Schofield. And his motivation to deliver the message is to make sure that Blake's brother doesn't die. It's basically a transference of Blake's motivation onto Schofield. I just think it would have been more effective if Schofield had died and then Blake had to overcome his own guilt over having chosen his friend to come with him on this mission and then get through that as he pushes forward, and then having to fight his guilt almost to a certain degree, overcome it, and then deliver the message at the end, or not deliver the message at the end. I also want to point out that this has really nothing to do with the performances of the two leads. I think they both did a good job, and I think that if Blake had continued through the film, there wouldn't have been any sort of negative consequence from a performance standpoint. It was really just the emotional investment that Blake had in the situation I feel was stronger, and Schofield being asked to carry that weight after Blake died was just a misstep. There's still a lot to be invested in his journey. He finds out a lot about family on his way from the trenches to the not the final attack, but the attack that the British are putting forward. I just don't think it's as compelling. That is, of course, an opinion. You might feel completely different, but for me, that knocked the film down a little bit. I also have one little nitpick with the film. It might not annoy anyone else, but it definitely started to grate on me as the film went on. I mentioned at the start that the film stars George MacKay and Dean Charles Chapman, and then features a list of other British actors like Benedict Cumberbatch and Colin Firth. The way that these British actors are spread throughout the film, to me, started being a little distracting because they always started showing up one at a time. There's about 5 or 6 of them, and so every 15 minutes or so, one of them would pop up. And the effect of that is that you start thinking, hey, it's that guy from The Kingsman, or hey, it's Sherlock Holmes, or hey, it's that guy from Fleabag. And yet, the point of the cinematography, the choice of trying to do the continuous one take, at least partially, must be immersion. And I think constantly having these pretty famous, pretty well-known British actors popping up in cameos really breaks that immersion, at least it did for me. Once you get to the last one, it's like, oh my God, could we not have just gotten like 5 or 6 no-name British actors who were pretty good, but who we wouldn't recognize? Because I think that would have done a lot more. This whole film is built around the idea that we're following 2 British soldiers through an entire journey. We're trying to show the First Great War on a small scale. And so I feel like the inclusion of all of these famous British actors is a disservice to that intention. Once again, just my opinion on that. People might not have cared at all. In fact, I'd love to know if you cared about it in the comments below. So once again, I just want to reiterate that this film is a technical marvel, and cheers to every single person who worked on it. However, I do feel like the film overutilized this idea of doing one long take, and it would have been better served if it had gone the more Children of Men route, where you have a bit more traditional editing, and then for the main sequences, the big sequences, you do those in a one take, and I feel like that would make the film that much more impressive. And given how I feel about how the emotional center of the film switches from one character to another, and how that is a disservice to the overall film, I think that 1917 ultimately illustrates that even a film that approaches technical perfection can still fall a bit short of greatness if that emotional center is a little bit off, or if there is a misstep in how we get to the end of the film. But that's it for me. Please let me know what you thought about this review in the comments below, and let me know what you think about 1917. This is actually the first review that we've ever done on Cinemateq. It's something I've tried out. It's something that you guys have asked for in the live streams, and so we're gonna see how this goes. For the next month or so, there's gonna be a couple of reviews put up on the channel every week, so make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and you won't miss any of them. Coming up, I did see Underwater last night, so there will be a review of that coming up live in a few days. I'm also going to be doing a classic review for Vertigo, which is playing in 70mm at the TIFF Bell Lightbox, so I'm pretty excited for that. And I guess just a general note on how the channel is going to be changing a bit over the next month or so. There's always going to be a video coming out on Friday, whether it be a review or something else, and then other reviews will be coming out sporadically throughout the week. And then Sundays are going to be when we do the weekly news wrap-up, but those are always going to be live streams. So depending on what's happening on that Sunday, it might be a live reaction to an award show, it might just be a couple of hours where I can talk about the big news of the week and we can all discuss it. As an example, this Sunday we're going to be talking about the DGA Awards and the BAFTA nominations and a lot of different award season-centric stuff. So I would love for you to join me on Sunday. That live stream will be starting at 4 p.m. Eastern. Keep an eye out on the Cinemateq Twitter for any kind of updates on that. It is at Cinemateq with an underscore at the end. I think that's all I had to talk about today, all the things I had to tell you. Thank you so much for sticking around and listening to me ramble. One last thing, you should go watch Victoria if you haven't. It is a true one-take film and it is incredible to watch. The tension that I was talking about, it's there. It's all over the place. And it's just a very good film. So go watch that movie. Go watch more movies and have yourselves a good weekend.